Hello all, it's Vanessa Love. Thanks for coming and watching my video and visiting my channel. Hopefully you like, share, and subscribe. Alright, so I wanted to talk a bit about today. I wanted to talk a bit today about people who say that therapists are only in the field because they have some issue that they need to resolve. Now, I feel like the people who say this are probably rationally and justifiably upset at some therapist in their life at some point who made the wrong diagnosis, said the wrong thing, whatever it is that they're upset with. And, I can't really fault them there at that point, But for me, I do really feel like that, there's this part that is like, really? That's what you think? I mean, there are some therapists that clearly have issues. They don't really know how to conduct themselves. There are still a lot of people who are greedy in this field that I think they got into the field for just the money aspect instead of the helping people aspect. But, they stay in for reasons. Hopefully the money's good for them. Anyway, I find it very difficult to believe that people get into this field because they had such crappy things happen to them that the only way that they felt that they had to resolve it is to go into a field that focuses on other people and their healing, and that at no point is there any opportunity for that therapist or that person who became a therapist to heal themselves to a point where they are just they've healed themselves and now they're helping others, right? Fully helping others with the things that they're going through. There are also a lot of therapists who work with populations that have nothing to do with their life and that they just really enjoy working with. I can think of, I know someone who really likes working at this homeless program, and she really likes all of the drama that it brings. I think that, there is a possibility that she hasn't had a lot of drama in her life, and I don't know if she's really necessarily had a, moment where she had house instability or, not having a consistent shelter. So I think there is something with that where she hasn't experienced that, but she really does love working with that population. And I also have a colleague who works in a facility with people who are disabled, and I don't think that there have been people in her life who have been disabled. I think later on, as she was growing up, it was found out that her mom had MS, but I don't know if that was kind of throughout her life. It sounded to me like her mom led this really, really awesome life, and at some point it was oh crap, this is MS. And she doesn't really work with people who have MS. She works with people just all different types of people with different disabilities and intellectual disabilities who they're only going to reach kind of a certain point. But she's I appreciate her. She's so enthusiastic about it. For me, it's a little bit too much of a heartbreaking work that I wouldn't be able to do it. Also, we really admire in this culture doctors who are willing, oh Jesus, I spit and you can totally see that. Doctors who go ahead and they have something personal happen to them, they had a grandparent who had not MS, Alzheimer's, and they go into Alzheimer's research, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, I'm so glad that this person, and so I'm like, well, why wouldn't you also be happy for a therapist who was I dealt with depression or anxiety or trauma or anger issues or jealousy or couldn't communicate with the world or any of these things, and then basically say oh, you couldn't possibly. Oh, and I know that there are some people who like go through like recovery from substance abuse, and they love it when they have someone treating them who have been through a similar substance abuse and addiction issues. I think they feel like safer, and that person understands them a little bit more. I always have my concerns, but I'm like, okay, I mean, if that's cool. There is such a thing as over-identifying with a client, and especially over-identifying with their issues. And so, luckily when you have a very reflective therapist, that won't always be an issue. But, like, some therapists can't help but over-identify, and that is an issue. It definitely can lead to breaking boundaries and an ethical dilemma at some point. However, like, I don't know if I necessarily agree that a therapist has to go through the same thing that the client has been through in order for the client to respect the therapist enough to trust that. I know someone like in one of the forums had ever asked if I was adopted, because I work with people who who are adults who have been adopted or through the foster care system as kids, and I have not. However, I have been very fortunate to have had the experience of working with quite a number of people, especially early on, who have this particular history. And I actually still continue to work with people who have been through foster care, who have been adopted, and as adults are struggling with identity and all of these other things. And I really appreciate that that's something that I have really good experience with, and like I can really get people to a place where they are very functional, because there's so many things, as you know, with my video with adult reactive attachment disorder, that it is an issue, and I don't necessarily have had to have gone through it myself in order to be very helpful. I have to be understanding. I have to have the experience, right? And I'm also thinking that there are people who work with people who have schizophrenia and psychosis who haven't had the experience of schizophrenia or psychosis. And, those people are, because of the way that they, how many people they have seen with these disorders, that they know what they're doing. They know how to, treat them properly and all of that stuff. It's unfortunately another place where I struggle, just because it's tough to acknowledge the reality that they have, but not tested enough that they dislike you, but tested enough that they appreciate that you're what you're trying to do. It's a very, very fine line, and I feel like at times I've been very good at it, and other times I've absolutely failed at it. I also think that there's a significant difference when, at least in my experience, when I've worked in a place where it's older population who also have had these struggles and have been through multiple hospitalizations, and so they kind of know the rigmarole, and I can say things like, I'm not entirely sure what you might be seeing, but I can't see it, which there was one guy who turned to me and was like, okay, and like, I appreciate that, but there have been other people who I've been like, I don't know if that's necessarily true, or, like, how would you know that, or, whatever question it was that they kind of got really upset at me about, and then they were just like, no, I'm out. Nope, I'm done. And I think it was kind of the difference between someone who had been institutionalized and who had multiple hospital stays, and who kind of understood on some level that this might not be something that was in a reality, or other people's reality, I guess, and compared to someone who was relatively young, who was experiencing delusions and not hallucinations, and here I am trying to be like, oh, I've worked with this population, I know what to expect, and I'm like treating them as if they're institutionalized, and they're not, and it like, there were a lot of things with that with some of those cases where it was just like, oh yeah, that's that's going to be very different to private practice compared to someone who has been institutionalized and probably will end up in a living situation where there's a lot of assistance with, you know, medication and making sure that they bathe and that type of stuff. So I also think that this field, for most people, is a calling, in that there are so many deeply passionate people in this field who feel that this is their purpose, and I just respect that so much. And I also just can't believe that someone would kind of like dismiss that passion and purpose because of their anger or because of whatever, and just say like, oh, you know, like, people who are in this field, they have their own issues. All right, sure. But how do you explain all of these other things? And also, is there a point where you would feel necessarily that a therapist has reached a point where they have healed and now are healing other people because they know it, and and have had the experiences with other people, with other like clients and populations, that they can now give because they're knowledgeable, not because they're trying to heal something. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. I hope that's busting that myth. And I will talk with you guys soon. All right. Thanks so much.